Hello and welcome back to another lesson of Logos and Letters. My name is Liam and we're continuing on with the investigation to what's unique and what's not unique about substances. So continue off for this part. So hyparkai de tais usias kai to meiden autais enantion ainai. So with all the substances, it underlies them that nothing is contrary to them. Tegar protai usiai dianie enantion. Right? Actually, I should put the rhetorical sort of pronunciation on this. Tegar protai usiai dianie enantion. Hoyon toi dinianthropoi. Hey toi dinis doioi. Right? For how could one say that there's anything contrary to a primary substance, such as a particular man or a particular animal? Udenga restin enantion. There is nothing contrary to them, right? Let's continue on something new. Udege toi anthropoi tois doioi uden estin enantion. Right, so it sort of doubles down here. And for there is not something contrary, for there is nothing contrary to man or to animal. So instead of saying particular man or some certain animal, he's just saying in particular, in general, there is nothing contrary to man, contrary to animal. Now he could be saying that about every instance of animal, but it's him saying against the species or the genus, right? So notice how he's saying that there is nothing contrary to this or that substance, even if it's a secondary substance. Uden estin enantion. There's nothing contrary. Remember, this word enantion is contrary, and things set opposite one to the other. Okay. Uk idion de tutotes usias. It is not. So this is where we get our word idiot from. If anyone was wondering, hey, that word looks like, yes, correct. You trace it right back to its roots. You get to this adjective, okay, which means, which is also where we get the word like idiosyncratic. So it's not unique, or it's not peculiar is another way of translating it. It is not peculiar of the substances, though. It's not unique of the substance. Alakai. Alakai is like, but rather, according to many other things. Hoyon epi tu posu. For example, according to quantities. Okay, so it's not just unique to substances, that there's nothing contrary to them, but to quantities. Now, a mathematician would say, hey, what do you mean quantities? Do you mean discrete or continuous? Well, we're going to answer your question in just a moment, so hold on. Toigar tipeikai e tripeikai. So, for example, just like nothing's contrary to a 2 cubits or 3 cubits, udenestin enantion, nothing is contrary. Udege tois deka, right? So neither is it contrary to things like 10, udeton toyuton udenni. So nor is it contrary to anything of these sorts, okay? Toyuton, of these kinds. And to the mathematician who was wondering if it was discrete or continuous, you can tell now which one it is. It's discrete quantities. Nothing is contrary to discrete quantities. Okay, so let's have a look. All right, nothing is contrary to 2. All right, or if you counted all the sails between the two ships, let's say there's 40 sails. Nothing is contrary to 40. If there's 240 men, no, probably be less actually. Let's say there's 160 men in between these two ships. There's nothing contrary to 160. Right? There's nothing contrary to 3. Okay, one more. Nothing contrary to 2. All right. Ilme tisto polu toi oligoi fae enantion ainai eto megatoi mikroi. Tonde aphorismenon poson udeni enantion estin. Right, so he's foreseeing a conjecture here. Not unless someone was to say, faie, to say that the few is contrary to the many is contrary to the few, right? Polu, oligoi, or the large is contrary to the small. The great is contrary to the little, okay? In that case, you have an argument, you have something to investigate. Is the great contrary to the small, the little? Do I have an artwork that represents that in a way? Something great standing next to something little? I don't think I do. Or do I have a lot of things standing contrary to a few things? Not that I can see. So for now, let's just conceptualize it. So we know that discrete quantities and substances don't have contraries. Obviously, we don't ever say that, 2 is the opposite of 4. That makes no sense. We don't say 10 is the opposite of 100. We don't say I am the opposite of, right? We don't say those things. But moving on, if you wanted to say that the few is contrary to the many, then you've got yourself a reasonable position. And if you want to say that a great deal of something is contrary to a little bit of something, then you've got yourself a reasonable point. Tonde aphorismenon poson udeni enantion estin. Right? But for now, he just says, because this particular line, spoiler alert, is going to be treated at length in its own chapter. So I'm just going to leave it there. But we all already know how we conceptualize and how we understand the few to be contrary to the many and things like that. So there's no real suspense here. Let's just leave it for its own chapter with its own examples. Donde aphorismenon poson udeni enantion estin. So of the determined, of the discrete quantities. This can mean determined. That's why I said that. But of the discrete quantities, poson, quantity, there is nothing at all which is contrary to them. Okay. Now, aphorismenon, you may recognize as a word that came up, I think twice. Yeah, look, aphorismenon and aphorisdai. So discrete quantities, of course, is a translation, but a quantity with a boundary is another literal translation. Right, a quantity with a boundary. Like if you say 20, okay, 20 has a particular boundary around it. It's no more and no less than what it is. Okay, I guess you can say that for all discrete numbers or quantities, whatever, that they are no more and no less than what they are. All right, so let's have a look at this one. If you count all the birds in the room, maybe even those two, if you want, then there's no more and no less than that amount of birds. All right, but if you had a continuous quantity, there is the potential for being more or less of that quantity. So if you had 20 hours in 20 hours it took you to complete an assignment, that's the limit. It took you no more and no less than that. But anything that's not set and bounded like that continues on. Now, can these particular quantities, there's an almost infinite amount of them, be something like something that has a contrary, well, we will look at that. Okay, we will have a look at that. So if that's bothering you, just hold on tight. So in the next part, we'll investigate some more of these things. This will be our next lesson here. Tokai de he usia me epitekestai to malon kai to eton. So more or less, we're going to keep diving into the particulars of substance, but a lesson which is not so obvious here, which should be taken away before we wrap things up. You know, it sort of comes about by our investigation of discrete continuous, is noticing the interconnectedness of all of the different parts that he's talking about, all the different things that he's talking about, how substance and quantities and qualities have already, in the space of a few paragraphs, been connected with one another in a really deep and meaningful way. This logic, what I'm trying to say, this educational logic, doesn't deal with things separated into different silos or separated and they're insulated. No, this education, whenever it can, will connect the dots between different things. Why is that important? It takes the burden off the student's shoulders to always be making connections. You don't have to sit there and rack your brain and think, oh, how does this fit in with this other thing? Don't have to put that pressure on yourself. All right. You can go steadily forward in this course, knowing that the connections will be pretty much just given to you. All right. All you really have to do, all we have to do, is follow along. And if he generates an example, okay, if he speaks specifically about discrete quantities, it's our job then, right? This is where the responsibility falls on us. It's our job then to formulate our own examples of that, right? So he gave us discrete quantities then. So we came up with all these different types of examples for discrete quantities. He didn't speak so much about continuous, so we leave that alone. And that's a sort of philosophy you can apply to all your education, is you need to keep the blinders on sometimes. It is when you enter in a new sort of domain, or area of thought, you want to run wild with it. You want to apply it to everything that you possibly can. It is very good wisdom that I've heard from excellent teachers throughout my life, some who are dead and some who are actually alive. It's literally just keep your eyes on the prize. All right, it's something sports coaches say all the time. Keep your eyes on the prize. So when the philosopher is articulating what logic is, don't ever feel burdened that you need to apply it to your life and apply it to your faith and your science and all these other things. Just keep your eyes on the prize. We'll focus on what he's saying. We will generate our own examples and our own connections, and especially modern examples. Why modern examples? You would have noticed this throughout the entire series so far. There's a particular emphasis that I've got on modern examples. It's because he didn't have this data. All right, so Aristotle, the philosopher, the Stagirite, he was born many hundred years before Jesus Christ of Nazareth, before the apostles, before Pontius Pilate and all these other historical figures, many hundred years, potentially when some of the final books of the Old Testament, the Apocrypha, were being written, he was alive, but he didn't have the information that we have about the world. Okay, he didn't know about macropods, right? He didn't know about the Tasmanian tiger or the I think he's trying to draw the Tasmanian devil here, but it also looks like a spotted quoll. So, or the koala. Okay, he didn't know about. He doesn't know about sloops and cutters and frigates. Although he would have had the basic idea of them, he didn't know about the looking glass or the cathedral or all these other modern things. Okay, so it's a little bit important that we apply some of these modern touches just to complement this older education, and to not modernize it, but to make it more familiar and more complete. So those are the three philosophies that we're going to hold throughout this. Stay focused on each line as it comes, create examples of exactly what he's talking about, and wait patiently to answer questions that pop up. Okay, so if you have a question about what about continuous quantities, you've got an awesome active mind, and you just got to be a little bit patient until we come to continuous quantities, because I can tell you right now, I don't know where chapter 6 actually begins. I think I've gone way past it. Yeah, I have. But when we get to that, we treat it at length. So that's the second of the philosophies. And the third philosophy is to make it a little bit more complete in its data set. And if we do those three things, we'll proceed very steadily, very thoroughly, exhaustively, and we'll be doing the Staggerite a favor by complementing his ideas with ideas he didn't have access to, right? Because he didn't obviously have access to anything biblical and scriptural. Of course, he didn't have access to things like firearms or the crucifixion. Okay, he didn't know about the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, obviously. He didn't know about Noah and the covenant. Okay, and he didn't know about different types of animals. So with those three things stated, I think this is a good point to say them, because it's still early in the course. If we look, what page are we up to here? We're up to pretty much page 19 of, and I plan on covering all 812 pages. So this is a great place to say these things, because there's still so much to go, and I've already given examples of how I've been implementing those. Now, this may change from time to time if it's clear that he's never going to answer that. I'm aware of a couple things that he doesn't do that with, and then I'll step in and then we'll answer it early. But besides that, I hope all of that makes sense. I hope all of that sits well with you. If it doesn't, let me know, and maybe I'll change my mind. But for now, as always, si semper fortis in opere tuo. My name is Liam, and thank you so much for your time.